One of the major wiring components that we're going to have for our smart greenhouse is going to be the creation of a relay that can be connected to our Grove Shield that will draw power such that we can run a fan, a light, or any other object that we want to be able to run in our smart greenhouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a pigtail alligator connector that's going to connect to our relay. So we're going to need a couple of tools. We're going to need a flathead screwdriver, a small one. We're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to need some wire strippers. Then the other components that we are going to need is we're going to need this pigtail wire connector. It's already got a red and a black for positive and negative on it. And these pigtail connectors are great. They're a little thicker than some other wires, but what makes them nice for the smart greenhouse project is that you can plug them together. So you can take the female and the male and connect them together, and they'll hold very tight, and so they won't let go. So what we're going to do for our relay is we're going to use the female side for our relay. So one of the first things that you have to do first is to make sure that you put on the insulation protection for our alligator clip itself, because that's going to protect us from having to just touch the bare alligator clip. And if you forget to do this, it's very hard to put it on after you've crimped your alligator clip to the wire. The other thing to notice with our wires is you'll see that the red and the black each have a little wire that is sticking out. That's going to be what's going to allow the current to flow into our alligator clip. So a good thing that you can do with these is just kind of bend them over and make them flush right against each of the insulations. So what you're going to do is that insulation is going to get crimped onto the alligator clip. So let's do our positive one first. So make sure that the wire that you just bent over is facing downward. And I'm going to place it right into my alligator clip. And if you notice, there's a little hole right there in the alligator clip. Sometimes you can use that to hold the wire, or you can just have the wire get crimped right in. I have done it both ways, and both ways work perfectly fine. So I'm going to get my wire right in, and I'm going to grab my wire strippers, and I'm going to take the little wire triangle flaps on the end there, and I'm going to crimp them right over so I can hold that insulation nice and tight. And sometimes what I do is I also bend in the sides just a little bit, just to make sure that that wire isn't going to wiggle or come loose at all. And you get a very nice solid connection out of that. Then what you want to do is take your insulation cover for your alligator clip and slide it over. I've always found it easiest if I just take one of my little screwdrivers, kind of open the alligator clip, so it makes it a little flatter, and then the insulation just slides right over, and now I've got the red side done. We're going to do exactly the same thing with the black side. I'm going to get my alligator clip, and put it down onto my alligator clip, grab my wire strippers, and crimp those flaps right down onto the wire. And again, I'm just going to make sure that that wire isn't going anywhere. All right, and if you're nervous about it, you can always give the wire a good tug, and if it doesn't come loose, you've got a pretty good connection. Same thing, I'm going to grab my screwdriver so I can open up my alligator clip, and I'm just going to slide the insulation right over. Now I have a alligator clip with the female barrel plug on the end. Next thing we're going to need to do is let's attach our fan or whatever object that you want to connect. And for that, we are going to end up attaching it to the male side of a similar plug, except this one has a little screw connectors on the end. So these are little terminal blocks that are attached to our connector. And what's nice about these terminal blocks are they are pretty solid in that when you unscrew them to insert the wires in, there's an entire piece of metal on the inside that's kind of pushed back down when you screw them to tighten them, so they make a very nice tight connection. And be careful, because on the top of this there's a plus and a minus sign. Make sure that you're putting the wires in correctly, because if you don't, a lot of things will not work. So general convention is red is always positive and black is always negative. So I'm going to stick my red right into my alligator clip, and I am going to take my Phillips screwdriver and tighten it up really tight. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my negative. And sometimes if you get frayed wires, you can just give them a little twist, and sometimes you can twist them over, particularly if they're small, particularly with these fans. It's very small, skinny wire. And I'm going to stick my wire in, and now I've got my fan connected to the male side of my pigtail clip. All right, and again, it's always a decent practice just to give it a little tug to make sure that it's not instantly going to come out. All right. Next up is I need to get my relay into the circuit. And so what we're going to do, remember, is we're going to attach the red to the 3.3, and the ground is going to get attached to the black side. So positive and negative, red is positive, black is negative. So somehow I've got to get my relay into this circuit. What we're going to do is we are going to clip and split this wire in two. So yeah, I like having the red one split, because then that way just the red goes in to our relay, and you just want to take off just a tiny bit of the insulation. So not much at all, because we're going to insert it into our relay. If you take off too much, it won't fit in the relay screws. And so same thing on the other side. So now I've got my wires are split, and I'm going to insert them now right into my little relay. And again, if your wires kind of fray out a little bit, spread out, just give them a little twist together. And there are flathead screws on your relay. And so that's why you need a flathead screwdriver to be able to undo the screws. So make sure that your screws are all loose and all the way up. That will give you space to insert in the wire. And you put one in. You just push it in as far as it will go, and then tighten it. Okay. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to have this tightened up, push it down, and now I have my relay attached to my circuit. And again, same thing, give them a little tug, and if it looks like they're going to come out, just take it back out, twist it again, and push it back in, and you should be good to go. And that's it. So now when we're ready, we'll be able to connect our relay to our Grove shield. And once we get it programmed, we'll just be able to plug it directly right in, and our fan will run. And that is how we wire up our relay. And for much of the Smart Greenhouse project, if you're doing this in a classroom setting, these are going to become pre-wired. And what's nice about that is if your relay breaks, because it is a switch that's inside of it, when you turn it on, you hear a click. And so if that click doesn't happen, that means a connection wasn't made. And that means that your relay's probably gone bad. If that's the case, you can just take your entire relay component, you can set it aside and go grab another one and see if that one works.